I'm here with Tairi Delgado, who's one of the course managers here at Udacity. They're the ones who really work one-on-one with students to help them through projects or help them understand material. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
So the first thing I wanted to ask you was, many people have this conception that online education is very impersonal because we're kind of taking the synchronous in-person communication out of it. Do you think online education generally is that impersonal?
I think it really is what you make out of it. Personally, for me, like knowing how a lot of students interact with each other, I see students connect each other through chat, Facebook, LinkedIn, getting together in groups, and I think that kind of level of interaction, it doesn't have to be impersonal. It could be something very rewarding. I mean, you can meet somebody, from Dubai or Mexico or China, somebody that you would never have a chance to meet before, and instantly you could have a connection with something that you both have a mutual passion for. When I look at online education, I think in many ways it could be a way to learn things more in a personal way, because at least my experience when I was in college was that you would sit in a classroom with 200, 300 people, and it's very hard to talk to your professor and get one-on-one advice. I found the most personal experience you could possibly ever have is a small group of people that were your friends who were taking classes together. You could really get the chance to work on the problems and really collaborate with each other. The next best experience I had was very few times, but when you had a one-on-one tutor who really understood what you were struggling with, knew the material very well, and knew how to personalize that for you. I think online education has the benefit of doing both, because when you're going through these classes, you have the opportunity to practice on these quizzes at your own pace. And when you put in your answer, it's not like somebody's just marking whether it's right or wrong. They're actually trying to tell you specific feedback about what's wrong and how to actually fix it. And you get immediate feedback to work on it and practice it more. And I think with the ability of getting groups of people to study together, I think you don't usually have that in all settings. So to be able to have that, I think it can make online education really great.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you're saying that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's certain ways that we can do things online that not only break that impersonal nature that people think when they think of online education, but in many ways actually make it even more personal, because you've got people talking, over the internet, so they can be available all the time.
Right.
They can leave messages and come back to them later.
Right.
And as a result, it's not, bottled into this 1 hour lecture time when it's, we're having a great discussion, but now class is over and we have to move on. Or, professor's 1 hour for office hours a week and you go talk to them then, but you can't ever, interact with them on a regular basis. It sounds like we're really building in a way to interact consistently throughout the experience.
Right. Actually, I'll take it even one step further. I think the traditional model is you would go talk to your teacher to get all of the knowledge that you want. But I think in this age where we're constantly learning new things and revitalizing our skill sets, sometimes you just need to be able to learn new things and also facilitate collaboration with a group of small people that you would be working with. So I think this model has changed more from a teacher directed model of presenting lectures more towards this online content that you can learn, and then if something doesn't quite make sense, you have a group of people that are willing to support you because they're trying to accomplish the same thing. And I think that is a powerful motivator, having a group of people that you could interact with and help each other out. Whereas instead of always going to the teacher, you have a lot more resources to connect with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's especially the case in our OMS program, and as well as some of the Udacity Nano degrees, that because they're so flexible, because they're so open, and because they're so cost effective, we attract people we wouldn't attract otherwise. Mm-hmm. And so in some of the classes I've worked on in the past, we've had experiences where someone in the class is already an expert in their field in something we're talking about. And we can basically say, you don't really need to listen to us about this. You've got so-and-so over there. She's working on, a world-class project in robotics.
Right.
And she knows far more about this than we do. And she would never, take years off of her career to go get a master's degree. But if she can do it flexibly like this, she comes and does this. And then she, in turn, builds the class up even more, because having her there as a resource, even if she's just a student in the class, is incredible for everybody. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, the the fact that you bring that up actually, because we constantly, like, at least I know for myself, like, even though like I've gone through the content, I know it pretty well, like there's times like when you're interacting with students, you realize that there's more to learn. And like you said, every student brings their own perspective. And I think on top of that, like when we're talking about these study groups, is that what we tend to find is that when students explain things to other students, they tend to learn content even better. So I think that's one of the extra benefits that normal classroom settings don't really account for, is like having a lot of time for students to help each other out, because in the end, that's going to be what's going to drive them the most.
Yeah, having that classroom that's kind of available 24/7, even though we don't want students to think that they're expected to be there 24/7, having it always available kind of means that things that we usually have to put into the set aside time for lectures can now just happen organically over a much longer period of time. But the conception that online education is very impersonal doesn't come from nowhere. It came from some courses that are done in a model that makes it very difficult to feel like you're connected. So in theory, we have some students who are taking this class who will go on to be instructors for online classes, or will go on to be TAs for other classes in the OMS.
Yeah.
What would you recommend to them for when they're teaching classes in the future, making sure to foster the kind of class that could develop this community, could develop this communication between students?
Right, I think that's a really good question. So I would take a look at like what kind of environment you're trying to set up and what incentives that gives. So case in point, like I remember again when I was back in college, like a lot of times it was graded on a curve. And so one thing that we noticed is that a lot of the classes that were graded on curves didn't really foster a lot of sense of community, because students felt that they had competed with each other rather than wanting to help each other out. But in the end, it kind of drew back the ability to learn in general. Like I felt like because you're so focused on competitive scoring, you're not willing to take the time to really learn from somebody else. And you also want to take a look into what motivates students. Like why are they in the classroom in the first place? Like what passions they have that are driving them to take these classes. Some things that I found when I was going through classes was that incentivizing collaboration with small groups, getting students to, from the very beginning, have a voice about who they are, why they're interested in taking this class, being able to connect with other people so they could find mutual people in the class that they would want to interact with. And then from there, help them set up some kind of guiding rules that will allow them to, throughout the course, work with each other. Other things that I've noticed is that, when professors allowed, or instructors allowed opportunity for students to kind of play around and venture on their own a little bit to really learn the material on their own, like really helped a lot for me at least. Because sometimes like you're gonna want to prescribe a lot of quizzes or homework assignments. And I think in many ways, like when I had classes that I didn't have to like every week submit like a homework assignment, but rather take the time to really focus on the problem sets and quizzes and concepts that I felt that I really need to study with, and then study with my group of people from my study groups, allowed me really to thrive. I think sometimes homework could be more at times, it feels sometimes like you might be just doing more work than actually learning quality material that you feel like you really need to focus on. Homework I felt was something that you were supposed to practice on, but in the end it was something that you were graded for. So like a lot of times it didn't really incentivize people to play around and just kind of explore a little bit. I mean, obviously like you can't expect somebody to know something the first time around, like what is it to do a linear regression, or maybe like how to add a whole bunch of variables together if you're learning algebra for the first time. Sometimes you just need to practice that, and sometimes students are going to know what they should focus on, as long as you give them kind of ideas of how to be self-sufficient learners. The last component I would make is that if you really want to set up a good learning environment, it's not only just collaboration and incentives, but also how to help students learn to be self-directed learners. Like what are the main ways that people learn, and what kind of incentives perform a habit over time that students will want to develop so that they could always learn new concepts.
So it sounds like really what we need to do is make sure we're leaving room for students to collaborate, we're leaving room for students to learn from failure, and we're leaving room for students to learn how to learn. And those are all things that I think are very real to the way we learn in the real world. They don't often make, or don't always make it into the classroom where we have a very artificial learning environment. But generally, it's very important to look at how people learn naturally when they're not in the classroom environment. They're not given homework or quizzes or tests or anything like that, but they're just out there learning from their experiences and try and facilitate the same kind of learning in the classroom.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for chatting with me today and for your insights.
Thank you, David, for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank y'all.
Thanks.